Divorce. It's one of the most talked about topics, often whispered about with judgment and confusion. But have you ever wondered what Jesus had to say about it? You might be surprised at the lessons he shared. It's not just about the "I do" part, but what happens when the vows are broken. Let's dive into Jesus' teachings and discover the timeless wisdom that still resonates today. The foundation of marriage according to Jesus. Let's rewind to when the world was a much simpler place, back to Genesis, where God set the stage for the grandest relationship ever. Marriage. In the beginning, God's design for marriage was clear: a lifelong commitment between a man and a woman. Now, before anyone starts thinking this sounds like some ancient, out-of-touch idea, let's think about it for a moment. The concept of marriage being the sacred bond goes beyond just saying "I do." It was about a deep spiritual union that is designed to last, even through the thickest storms of life. Jesus didn't just pull this concept out of a hat when asked about divorce. He took his audience straight to the core of the issue, the beginning of time. He reminded them of the creation narrative in Genesis, where God created humanity in his image, male and female, and declared that the two would become one flesh. Yes, one flesh. That means no matter how hard things get, the bond between a husband and wife is meant to be unbreakable. Jesus emphasized, "What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate." Matt chapter 19 verses 4 to 6. In other words, don't try to undo what God has made sacred. The Pharisees, trying to catch Jesus off guard. Of course, the Pharisees, the religious folks always looking for a loophole, had a different view. They asked Jesus the age-old question, "Is it lawful to divorce your wife for any reason?" Matt chapter 19 verses 3. Now this was a trick question. The Pharisees knew that divorce was regulated under Mosaic law, but what they were really trying to do was get Jesus to contradict himself. You see, the Pharisees had a different interpretation of the law of Moses, one that was much more lenient, allowing divorce for almost any reason. But Jesus wasn't having any of it. Instead of getting caught up in the debate between rabbinic schools, he flipped the script and pointed them back to the heart of God's original plan. He reminded them that divorce was never meant to be easy or trivial. It was a concession, not God's ideal. Divorce existed because of the hardness of human hearts, not because it was part of God's perfect design for marriage. Matt chapter 19 verses 7 to 8. It's almost like Jesus was saying, divorce happens, but it's not supposed to. Let's go back to what's best. The disciples, feeling the heat. Now, if you think the Pharisees were shocked, wait until you hear how the disciples reacted. They were straight up flabbergasted. When they heard Jesus' high standard, they thought, well, if this is the case, maybe we should just skip the whole marriage thing altogether. Matt chapter 19 verses 10. Essentially, they were like, marriage sounds too risky. Let's just remain single. But Jesus, being the wise and loving teacher he was, didn't just brush them off. He pointed out that while celibacy was a gift for some, Matt chapter 19 verses 11 to 12, it wasn't the ideal for everyone. Jesus' message wasn't about making marriage impossible. It was about upholding the sacredness of the marital bond. Sure, there are challenges, but that doesn't mean you throw in the towel. The disciples were surprised, but Jesus' standard was still rooted in love and commitment. The exception clause, the hot topic. Now let's get to the real debate. The exception clause. Matthew chapter 5 verses 32 and Matthew chapter 19 verses 9 mention an exception where divorce may be permissible on the grounds of marital unfaithfulness or sexual immorality. This has caused some serious head-scratching over the years. Why? Well, the other Gospels, Mark and Luke, don't mention this exception. So, does this mean Jesus never said it? Or did Matthew add it later? While some argue this exception doesn't belong, others insist that it does. And here's the kicker: even if Matthew did add it, it would still be part of the Bible and carry weight for Christians today. So, what does it all mean? Well, some scholars believe that the exception only allows for divorce, but not remarriage. Others believe divorce and remarriage are both permissible under certain circumstances. And then there are those who hold the view that no divorce or remarriage is acceptable, regardless of the circumstances. What Jesus really meant. Let's zoom out a bit. The big issue in all of this is understanding the term porneia, sexual immorality. What exactly does this refer to? Some say it includes adultery. Others believe it's a broader term that covers various forms of sexual sin. But here's the bottom line. Whatever the specific term means, it's important to understand that divorce in Jesus' view was never meant to be a casual thing. Jesus wasn't giving a free pass for anyone who wanted out of a marriage. Instead, he was focusing on the seriousness of marriage. The idea was that marriage was a holy institution, a divine creation meant to reflect God's love for his people. Divorce, when it happens, is a sign of brokenness and sin, not something to be taken lightly. That's why Jesus didn't just shrug and say, "Oh, divorce is fine whenever you feel like it." He said, "This is not what God intended. But if it happens because of sin, there's still room for grace." The equal standard, both men and women. In the time of Jesus, there was a notable double standard when it came to marriage and divorce. Men had the freedom to divorce their wives for reasons that ranged from trivial to serious, while women did not have the same rights. This unequal treatment was rooted in cultural and legal norms of the time, where men had more power and control in relationships. However, Jesus challenged this system with his radical teachings. He made it clear that both men and women were to be held to the same standard when it came to marriage, emphasizing the importance of mutual respect and commitment in a relationship. He took a firm stance on adultery, saying that even lustful thoughts in a man's heart were equivalent to committing adultery. Matthew chapter 5 verses 28. This declaration was revolutionary, as it showed that sin wasn't just about actions, but also about the intentions and purity of the heart. In Jesus' eyes, both men and women were equally accountable for their actions, and no one was given special treatment or exemption. His teachings promoted a vision of marriage that was rooted in equality, mutual love, and respect, where both partners were to uphold the sanctity of their union and remain faithful to one another. The takeaway: a call to grace and truth. So, what's the takeaway from all of this? First, let's be real. Marriage isn't always easy, but that doesn't mean we should throw in the towel at the first sign of trouble. Jesus' teaching on divorce isn't about setting impossible standards or creating a rigid rulebook. It's about upholding the sanctity of marriage and understanding the pain that comes with divorce. Divorce isn't the ideal, it's a concession. And while Jesus allowed for divorce in some cases, he never made it a free pass. The focus was always on redemption, forgiveness, and the original design of marriage. As we navigate through life and relationships, let's remember that the teachings of Jesus call us to something higher. Divorce should never be a casual decision. It should be viewed as a last resort, a result of brokenness and sin. And even then, there's room for grace and healing. Whether we agree with every nuance of Jesus' teaching or not, the ultimate lesson is clear. Marriage is sacred, and divorce, while sometimes necessary, is a sign of a fallen world. If you found this eye-opening and insightful, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with anyone who needs to hear this. Subscribe for more thought-provoking content on faith and life's big questions. Let's keep the conversation going. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, marriage is sacred and grace is key. See you in the next one.